All right, so we're checking out the EMAX Tinyhawk 3 Plus HD Freestyle. I did a video, or lots of videos, on some of these other variants of these models here. This one here was sent to me as a bind and fly, so it came in that box right there, just the drone by itself. And it did include 2 batteries, props, and the charger. The previous video I did on this model here was the analog version. This is the HDZERO version, so a little bit heavier. And so what I did was I bound this model with the transmitter, the E8 transmitter, which is also Express LRS, and the Transporter 2 goggles here that are HDZERO. These came with the Tinyhawk 3 Plus, the non-freestyle, the whoop version. This one is HDZERO. That came in the Ready to Fly kit that came in this blue case over here. So basically I just borrowed the transmitter and goggles to work with this one here, because obviously the Ready to Fly kit that I got for the analog version, this one obviously has analog goggles, and that also does have the E8 Express LRS transmitter, but I just used the one from this kit here to match up with this one. So for the binding of this to the goggles and the transmitter, that will be at the end of this video. So if you're wondering how to do that, I do have instructions on how to do that. It's pretty easy. So if you happen to have the Ready to Fly kit here of the whip, and you've been practicing and you're pretty happy with this one, and you want to move on to something a little bit faster, maybe for more outdoor flying, then naturally this model here is the one to transition to, because you don't have to make any changes to Betaflight, because the transmitter and the settings in the flight controller for this one do match up very nicely with the ones that are in the whoop. So there's no other sort of hassles have to be done to get everything to work right. Again, I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Also, I will link the review to the whoop Ready to Fly kit. That's with all this with the whoop here. I did that video a long time ago. I'll link that down in the video description, as well as the analog version of the Freestyle. Also link that down in the video description as well, so you can kind of compare which one might be better for you. Basically, they're pretty similar. Just one's a little bit heavier. They have the same motors, same frame, same flight controller. So I'm not going to go over everything in detail, but just a quick recap here. You have 1202.5 7000 kV motors. This is designed to run on 1S or 2S, and again, just come with the 2 1S 650 milliamp hour lipos, and you can see the special battery harness here for connecting up 2 lipos. If you want to run it on 1S, they have a little jumper plug here for one of these to bridge it so that you can fly it on 1S. It does fly on 1S. It's very slow, so if you're just starting out and don't want to go too fast, too scary for you, you can do this on 1S, but ultimately you'll walk through that. I guess it's kind of a training wheels if you're starting out and don't want to crash too much. And yeah, the flight controller here is a 25 by 25 millimeter whoop style flight controller, although I think it's kind of proprietary. I don't know if it's going to fit in other frames. I didn't test that. I didn't tear this apart and put into like 50 other frames. So if you're wondering about that question, again, quite often the answer is I have no idea. It's probably going to work for a fair number of frames, but keep in mind that this is designed for this specific frame where the USB port comes out of the top plate here. As you can see, the USB-C port there. Kind of unusual. Most of the time the USB-C port, if it's right angle, like that'll come out of the bottom here, and the flight controller will be on the bottom. But in this case, they put the flight controller on top and the VTX on the bottom. So this is an HDZERO whoop VTX. I think it goes up to 200 milliwatts, and then you got the nano camera here in the front. So if you're wondering about Walksnail, they don't have a Walksnail version. In theory, it should be able to be possible to put a Walksnail in here if you want to swap it out, or if you have the analog version and you want to upgrade to HDZERO or Walksnail, this is how you would do it. You'd put the VTX on the bottom here. And on the analog version, I think the VTX is already on the bottom as well. It's just it's like a half VTX, so there's no standoff in the back for that. So you'll have to make some modifications to get that to work. But this is how they've designed their setup here. This is how it works. And again, will this flight controller work in other quads? Hard to say. It might or might not. Just really depends on the frame, and there's no way to know unless I specifically put them into a, take this out here, put it into XYZ frame, and then you'll get an answer. But of course, I don't have time to do that. Probably don't have a lot of the frames that you're asking questions about. All right, so in terms of the weight, put out the weight of the analog version without batteries and the weight with batteries up here on the screen. This is from the previous video. And then this is what it is for the HDZERO version without any batteries. So it's like 65.6. I think the analog was like 62. And then with the batteries, the HDZERO version is coming in at 95.8. I think the analog version was like 92 or 93. So it's just a few grams heavier than the analog version. All right, so I did 2 narrated flights of this. The first time I just bound it up here and charged up the batteries and went and flew it. And I forgot that EMAX likes to put in sort of like beginner rates on their quads. I didn't really plug into Betaflight to check. So when I took it out for the first time, the rates were kind of low. I didn't really feel like I could do any flippy floppies with the rates being that low. So I just kind of just flew it around to see what kind of flight time I would get. I think you're going to get roughly 5 to 5.5 minutes of flight time on these 2 1S650s, depending on conditions and of course how much throttle input you're giving it, how aggressive you're flying it. So more aggressive, you're really pushing the throttle like crazy, you're probably going to get less flight time, of course. So the second time I took it out, I went into Betaflight, plugged it in, and I adjusted the rates. I put in some rates that I liked. Anyway, with the rates that I like in here, I did try to do some flippy floppies, and ultimately, as I had mentioned in the analog review, this one is a bit underpowered for something of this size. And again, I think they're targeting beginners, ready to fly kid, upgrade to this, someone that's probably not as experienced as me, or probably most of you that are watching this channel. Maybe your beginner friends might enjoy this a little bit more because it's going to feel a little bit safer, less aggressive, more controllable because it has a pretty good rates for beginners, at least stock. And the other thing that's kind of limiting you is this battery connector here, and the battery connector on the battery, the PH 2.0. So it's limiting the amount of current you can send from the batteries into the flight controller and the motors. And not sure if that's by design or why they continue to go with this little setup here, so they can keep using 1S batteries. Obviously, the idea is that you can use 1S batteries or 2 of them in a 2S configuration for a little bit more aggressive flying. But at the end of the day, this is what the limiting factor is in terms of if you're thinking about getting this model and thinking it's going to be a freestyle or a racing beast, that's not going to be the case for you. And this is tailored for beginners and less experienced pilots. They want to maybe give a better experience to those people that aren't going to be flying super fast, don't want to fly super fast, and just want to have a little bit more controllable experience. This is the model you definitely want to consider if that's one of you guys out there that are looking for something a little bit more, I guess, beginner friendly or less experienced pilot friendly. This one is going to be it. Now, if you're looking for acro or a racing beast, this is definitely not going to be it. So stay away from this one, of course, because this connector here is going to limit your abilities as well as the kV of the motor. I mean, at 7,000 kV, you can almost go 3S on this motor on some setups here. But of course, this flight controller won't do 3S. And of course, this connector won't allow you to plug in a 3S battery. So I guess the benefit of having a less power-hungry setup here is with this battery, you're going to get a pretty good flight time, 5 to 5.5 minutes, maybe even more. I didn't really push the battery that much because I don't, if you don't want to kill your batteries, like if you want them to last a little longer, I'd say stick to 5 minutes. If you don't care about your batteries and you want to have that extra 30 seconds of flight time every time you fly, but you don't mind buying new batteries maybe after a few months, then yeah, go fly as much as you want, puff these batteries, and just buy some more. Yeah, it's going to cover for this video for the Tinyhawk 3 Plus HD Freestyle. It's just they wish they'd do something with the names. That's a mouthful. Again, I'll link the other videos in this series that I have covered, and I'll show you the binding setup for this one if you happen to get the bind and fly and want the bind and fly for the whip and want to bind up the goggles and the transmitter to this guy. Those instructions are coming up right now. So for those of you that have the Tinyhawk 3 Plus ready to fly kit, the Express LRS version, if you got the Express LRS controller, of course, and the HDZERO goggles. That's the transporter to HD. If you have this ready to fly kit already, and then you want to upgrade to the new Tinyhawk Freestyle with HDZERO, so you can get this, pick this up as a bind and fly. It turns out that you actually don't need to do anything. I just turned on the transmitter and plugged this in, and it was already bound, even though it was bound to this one. I think the bind, or whatever the bind phrase that was in here is also in this transmitter, is also in this flight controller as well. So it turns out that it was already connected. And then of course, I'll show you the monitor. You just turn it on, it goes to auto scan, and it'll just connect to the video transmitter, no problem. I did do a video last year, about a year ago in February 2023, I think, where it was the FreeSky version of their ready to fly kit, and I showed you how to bind the transmitter and the goggles to newer versions of their bigger quads, like the Baby Hawk or Nano. I think the Nano Hawk X. So similar in the sense that I'll link that video down in the video description if you guys want to watch that whole thing. It explains all the little details. But it turns out that everything here was already connected. So I bought, this came separately. I just turned it on, it was already bound. Now that might not be the case for you. So if it turns out that doesn't work, you turn it on and it's not bound, then I'll show you how to do the binding, and then I'll show you how to connect up the monitor. It's very easy, actually. So there is a bind button that is very hard to see. It is right there, and you're going to want to reach in there with something flat, perhaps something not metallic. Maybe I'll use this plastic piece here, and you go in here, and then you can press down on that button and it'll go into bind mode, and then the lights will change a different color. And then on the transmitter, you're going to power the transmitter on. I'm going to make sure all the switches are up, and then you're going to press these two trim buttons on the left side. The one's pointing right, and on the right side the one's pointing left. So you're going to press those together. And then you get a green and red flashing light. It's going to put the transmitter into bind mode. Going to turn on the quad, so plug in your batteries. So you should get this purple light like that. And you can see there that it went out of bind mode. It only stays in the bind mode for a certain amount of time. So you probably want to put the quad into bind mode first. Alright, so I'm going to try and press the button now. And you should get this flashing sequence like this. And then we'll put the transmitter into bind mode. And this light should turn solid like that. It should stop flashing. And then all you need to do is just power cycle everything. So I'll turn off the transmitter. Power cycle the quad, turn the transmitter back on, turn on the quad, and it should connect. And then all the the modes and everything are the same. So go ahead and arm it. We're armed. And of course, they're labeled here: beginner, intermediate, expert mode, etc. So the same modes that were in the Whoop are actually now in the Freestyle. All right, so for the video, just turn on your monitor. And it should automatically go into a scanning mode right away. And you should just get video. There you go. So really, there's not much to do. So there you go, you got video. And the quad should already be bound, but if it's not, then you can do the binding procedure as I explained here.